Struggling to discuss sex and intimacy with your partner?
Not feeling met, seen, or heard in your relationships?
I'm Janelle.
And I'm Andrea. We're two midlife mavericks sharing our own experiences.
Messy AF and no regrets.
With marriage, divorce, polyamory, and pleasure.
We've learned that when you're brave enough to figure out what you want and ask for it,
with partners, friends, family, and most importantly, yourself,
you'll feel more alive and free.
Question everything, especially your mother's advice.
There's no rom-com formula for this, but don't panic.
Being alone matters. Honey, I can't miss you if you don't leave.
What if your breakup could be your breakthrough?
Our podcast is for Bravehearts.
Anyone who seeks or has found the courage to confront their fears and limiting beliefs about breaking societal norms in the spirit of finding their truth.
If you're seeking permission to be brave in your relationships
and want to feel less alone along the way, we got you. We just finished our podcast with Yana, which you're about to listen to. And yeah, I'm just like, I cried a couple of times just like listening to just like the grace and the knowledge and the wisdom of which he holds relationships sacred, knowing that they don't, like, that there's hard parts.
Yeah, there's really hard parts. And he talks about starting with curiosity over crisis.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about being right or being connected.
He talks about relationship death doulas.
Yeah. He talks about the pattern of repair and actually creating new pathways in your brain around repair. And after fighting, you can actually be even more solidly connected with your partner.
Mm-hmm.
This is about being brave in relationships and about sustaining and being in a loving relationship with yourself and with your partner.
Okay.
Hello, Bravehearts. Welcome to Permission to be Human. I'm Andrea.
And I'm Janelle.
And we're super excited for our next installment in our How to Talk About Sex and Intimacy series. We have interviewed each other, we have interviewed experts, and now we are interviewing Bravehearts. Yes, people just like you who are trying to be brave when talking about sex and intimacy in their relationships.
Mm-hmm. And today we are talking to Yana Rumi, who's a dear friend of mine. And while not a quote unquote expert, he's coming at us as like one of us. He is deeply experienced in the realm of relationship and repairs. And on the surface, his home life, might seem typical, but underneath is a unique blend of eccentricity, domesticity, and esotericism, woven together with ritual and revelry. Yana and his partner, Kali, are in an ethically non-monogamous relationship. They both work from home, Yana as a writer and a creator of sacred space, and they share their home with Kali's 14-year-old son, who lives with them most of the time and spends part of the week with his dad. And Yana, something that you mentioned before we got on this is that you thrive in liminal spaces where the past is honored, the present is shaped, and the future is conjured with intention. And that relationships and repair are a passion for you, and not only for your own relationships, but also you support others in navigating their own relationships. So we're so happy to have you here today. Thank you for agreeing to talk to us.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's really wonderful what you folks are up to and this whole movement. It just feels wonderful to be here. Thank you.
So we're going to dive right in. Like, what was the hardest thing when it comes to talking about sex and intimacy with your partner?
Whoa. Geez, I think there's two places where I have found a lot of difficulty. I think the first place is structurally, like having a safe space or a safe way, a safe container, some people use the word container, to have that conversation. So I think the first thing that's really important is that structural piece. Like, how can we speak about this and feel safe enough to speak about this? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so there's everybody might have different ways of creating that space. For me, in the past, I've been like, let's have rules and guidelines and ways that we do this so that we can feel safe. And I think more recently, it's sort of evolved into just asking those questions. Like, I wonder what is necessary for us to feel safe to talk about this stuff, and what's possible if we talk about these things, and sort of asking questions into our center and saying, how can we do this where we feel safe? And maybe even bring in a couple other distinctions, like not only safe, but how can my belonging in this relationship stay whole and connected? Like, because when you start talking about desires and sex, and like, your belonging might be threatened, right? You might, it's like, are you still going to love me if I tell you that I want to do this crazy thing, or this potentially, right? So that place where you can touch into, are we going to be safe? Is our belonging going to be met? And then the last one is, how can I stay in my dignity as I ask these questions or share these desires? And that's often sort of a more personal movement. Like, what are the ways that I can stay in my center and feel like strong in my dignity, asking and inquiring into questions about sex and sexuality and expression and all those wonderful juicy spaces. So that's the first thing, is the container.
I just love that you talked about the structure right away, because this is
Mm,
what we recently chatted about, is that like we can talk about all these theories and concepts, but like where the rubber meets the road is like, where are we doing this? Like, what room are we in? What mood am I in? What time of day is it? Am I shutting the door? Am I touching you? Am I not touching you? How are we sitting? And so really speaking to, I loved that, how can my belonging stay whole? Like, if I wanted to do that with my partner, where do I start?
Or an example maybe of how you did it. I know you asked some of these questions, but can you walk us through, like, oh, here I said you had a question or a conversation you wanted to have, and this is what you did.
As someone who does a lot of ceremony and ritual, I like to just create that space, like consecrate it. Like, let's make this space sacred. And let's start out by setting our intentions. Our intentions are for our safety. Our intentions are for our belonging and our dignity. Our intentions are to call in spirit, whatever is in alignment with you, your ancestors that are there for your highest good. Like, whatever really speaks to you, in like creating that sort of liminal but sacred space. Just the very act of speaking to one's desires around sexuality is bringing it to awareness, right? It's bringing it into the light. And so to the degree that you can do that at each step and be conscious. And so for me, often the first step is an invocation and a consecration, and sort of bringing a little bit of ritual to that space, because then the soma, the body, can sort of rest and down and back into that knowing. Right, so that allows for a lot to open and flourish in a space that feels held, not just by the structure, but by spirit. So that's the first move. The second one is, like, really, to me, is the hard part, and I think particularly being a human in a male body, I I wasn't super conscious of my desires. Like, they're kind of running in the background. For the longest time, they're kind of like, they're like a little dark for me even to admit to, right? So, I think the movement often is for folks to be like really clear about what it is they desire. Now, the more that you bring, again, the more you bring consciousness to that, the more intention and awareness you bring, the clearer it becomes. that can happen in real time. And oftentimes it does. It evolves as you have a safe space, and you can sort of just say, like maybe you just admit, like, I have a couple things that I think about or fantasize about, but I would love to just have a space where we explore what our desires are instead of like saying, okay, we're going to talk about this. Maybe it's more casual. Maybe it's just something where you're asking questions like, what does it feel like? What does it look like? What do I want? And then really allowing that to open up. Instead of like trying to go to like your deepest, darkest, scariest, sexiest thing, maybe you can just sort of go slow and feel into that question and really be curious. Like, be curious for yourself and curious for your partner. Give them some space to like explore themselves too.
I'm curious myself right now about, because how you're describing it, sometimes, as Andrea and I have spoken on the podcast, like it's like, oh, I'm in crisis, and so now I'm coming to my partner because I'm already at the edge. And what you just described, it sounds like it obviously still works for if you're at that crisis moment, but it also is like, hey, let's just set an hour or a time capsule to talk about our sex and intimacy without knowing what we're going to talk about. We're just going to explore our desires within ourselves and in relation to the other and see what comes up. And so we can just make that almost like a date that's set as sacred space, as you're speaking to, without it having to be, we have a problem and we're here to fix it.
Absolutely. I love
like
that.
A reframe.
And that's
it just so it almost like something you would do on a regular basis instead of only when there's an issue.
right. Oh, fully. It's almost like if there were an issue, I wouldn't even necessarily go into the content. That's one of the things that I find particularly powerful in if you're in a crisis space, it might not be the best time to go into like, oh, my desires or my needs aren't getting met and there's a crisis. Like if you're at that place, you need to go slow and tease out the little pieces that are there and get in underneath, because when you're talking about sex and sexuality, it's really tender, right? And if you're in crisis, that tender content often can get smashed. And so one of the things that we do whenever we're in sort of like I'm grabbed. We call it a grab or a hook. I'm feeling hooked or I'm feeling grabbed by this thing. We just pause and we have a whole movement that we go through there before we really delve into what the content is. And so, yeah, I feel like talking about deep sexuality and intimacy really I have to be in a real zone of what I call zone of resilience, like fully resourced. I'm there, I'm present, I'm not grabbed.
Okay, so I would love to have an example of that, because what I'm hearing is, because I think, certainly in my experience, right, we've spoken to this of, oh, I have my problem, like I want something that needs not getting met, and so now we're here to talk about it. But in the talking about it or prior to, right, we haven't set the structure or the container effectively. Potentially, that could be one issue. But if it is something that has, we're feeling activated around, you're using the word grabbed or hooked around, then what is that step? You said, oh, we do a movement or we do something else. Like how are you basically saying, okay, we have to come back to regulating our nervous system, whatever that looks like. And then once we're back to a regulated nervous system or centered, then we talk about the content of sex and intimacy. But you don't talk about sex and intimacy as content unless that's there. Is that...
Yeah, generally, yes. It's always, fluid as life is. Yeah, so the movement that we really, when we recognize that we're grabbed, hooked, use your word, it's always like acknowledging that first. Because there's a tendency to be like, it's like come up to the surface and you just have to talk about it and what it, and you just like oftentimes we set aside a space, hopefully intentionally, to talk about it, and then it's just like process and you're grinding into it and grinding into it, and um, it's often not effective. Right? It's often just like we're just processing, and I want to be right, and I want you to hear me. And one of the most important distinctions we have is um, you can be right or you can be connected and effective. You can't often have both, right? So we have this commitment to staying connected. And so that trumps whether or not we're right or not. So that's one move. And so with that, we pause and say, let's set aside time to work with this. And it's a game of like not letting that go for too long, right? We have this game of like, how soon can I bring my thing to our center, whatever that thing is, not letting it go 48 hours. Like, keep playing. Like, can we do this in 24 hours? Can we do this in 2 hours? How soon can we address the bump, the thing where we're just like, right? So that's the first move, is acknowledging it and like taking it head on. The second move is feedback loops. We have our own particular thing. Like, that's probably a whole nother podcast. But whatever your feedback loop or mechanism is, I've found the most effective ones aren't focusing on the content. It's really a process of whoever has the grab or whoever's feeling triggered, they have a chance to share. And that the other partner, the first move is just to reflect without anything else, so that the person with the thing feels heard. If you can do A and B, whatever your process is, just that alone will manage 95% of the situations, right? It's just, so let's just say, Janelle, can I use you for example?
Yes.
Let's say, we were hanging out and you said something that really just like felt like I wasn't seen. I just, I said this thing, but then you made this assumption about me and something felt off. I would come to you and just say, hey, Janelle, I really would like to talk about that because it felt like it made me feel this sort of thing. And are you free? Is there consent to share about this scenario? And then say, hey, I just want to share, and I actually just want to know that you've heard me. And then if there feels like there's something else we need to do after, great. And so I would share, and then what I would ask is just for you to paraphrase, just to like, to the best of your ability, speak back to me what I just said.
Mm-hmm.
And then pause and just like take a breath and then feel what's left and what's present. So oftentimes when I would come to or other comes to me with their thing, our natural reaction is sort of a defense. It's a survival mechanism, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the issue is as soon as you're in a defensive mode, as soon as either partner's in a defensive mode, it's done. You got to stop. Like, that's another really powerful rule. If you have any sense of being defensive or sense it from your partner, pause and say, there's some defensiveness present in me, in you, in the space, and nothing good moves out of that space.
So then what do you do? So like, do you wait 5 minutes? Do you wait 2 days? And how do you get out of that defensive mode, I think?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's developing whatever your practices are. I don't know if you guys have talked about emotional release practices. Those are great. Breathing, centering, go for a walk. Come back to your higher anchor. Like, what is your commitment to your partner? Is there a higher anchor? We started our relationship with like, I'm committed to your well-being in every movement. Like, I'm committed to all these we have 12 different places where we've like, I'm a commitment to this piece in our relationship. And so when you sort of smell or feel that vibe of defensiveness, it's always a good time to pause and, say, okay, let's come back to the structure, that structure of share and reflect. And I've actually, one of the best places to learn this is ChatGPT. If you use it, like you can actually say, hey, chat, I'm feeling da 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 da, and this is sucks, and I'm so pissed that they're doing this, and, da, 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 and it will just give you a reflection. It's just like, I hear you, you are going through it, and here's
nice.
what's going, and it's like the perfect
That's so funny.
neutral reflection, and so that's actually what is really valuable if you can do that in partnership and be that reflector of exactly what's present. Honestly, so many times that's all that's needed. Because then then when you're reflecting, oftentimes you kind of like, oh, it makes sense that you would feel that way. Instead of being like, that wasn't what I intended, right? That wasn't my intention. My intention was this. You're taking me wrong. That's often sort of a defensive posture. It's like, yes, but the impact on the person. So this conflation between intention and impact, it's really important to have those two separated, because then you often break the defensiveness pattern, is recognizing, yes, my intention was this, but that's not what's important. It's not important for me to be right now. It's important for me to stay connected. And so I want to hear about the impact first. And once that impact is heard and felt, then you might be able to say, oh, my intention was this, but now I understand the impact was that.
Yeah.
And it's not often that the person who's had the impact is ready to hear what you intended to say or what was meant to say until they've been heard about the impact that they received.
Okay, I'm going to pause you right
That's
there.
a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah.
So much juiciness. And I'm just going to start with the ChatGPT as a way to practice this. If you don't feel like you can hold it with your partner just yet, to practice saying why you're upset to chat and have chat reflect back to you and just see how you feel, right? See how you feel. Like once you've been heard, and if then, does your defensiveness, does the impact go away? Like, does it just like feel and notice what your body's doing?
Beautiful.
This is so funny because this is really a hack. This is what Janelle and I did the most in our 14-minute Voxes in the beginning of polyamory. Like I would talk and just talk and like do it all out. And then she was like, okay, I heard you say this. And the benefit was not only in the reflection, but in the talking itself.
Yeah.
Which I see would also be the case with AI because you're actually saying these things out loud.
And you can, this is another little AI trick, but you can say, I want you to be my XYZ therapist. I want you to be Buddha. Or I want you to tell me as if you're Thich Nhat Hanh, or, pick your favorite guru and say, I want you to reflect to me. Here's what's going on for me. I want you to reflect from that position, like the best therapist ever, or whatever it is.
Wow.
And that gives it even a little more context. You can even create a council. You can create a council of people and have chat, counsel you. But yeah, that initial just reflection that doesn't have the emotional content, isn't going to be defensive, is actually just going to be a direct paraphrase. And to the degree that you can learn how to paraphrase like chat for your partner is really powerful. Because then when you can have that with another human, the trust that's built and the reps that get built are really powerful. Because one of the things that we've recognized and sort of have held from the beginning is rupture and repair. Whenever that happens, it's actually, there's a rupture that occurs in the relationship, but then the repair comes together and it makes this bond in the relationship that's stronger than was what there before. Now you have a pattern of repair that you can know that you can come back to. So the more repair movements that you have together, the more stability and strength that that relationship has. So there's this place where rupture and repair actually is powerful. Is like as it can if you could do it consistently and count on it, then you have a foundation that's just so solid.
Okay. All right, Bravehearts, take a deep breath. Yana is just like dropping wisdom bombs left and right here. Okay, so what I heard is that oftentimes we're like, oh my gosh, I'm fighting so much with my partner, right? But actually what I'm hearing you say, you can be fighting all you want with your partner. Potentially that's actually beneficial as long as every time you have a fight or a disagreement or a difference, you're repairing that, because the repair actually strengthens the relationship, which means that the fight inadvertently can also strengthen the relationship as long as the repair process is in place.
Yes, it does require the completion. Many of us are addicted to the drama, right? There's different, we all have our stuff, right? We all have our parts that love the drama. We have our, I don't know how much you guys have gone into attachment stuff, but, we might have this anxious attachment or this avoidant attachment model that just like doesn't get the repair done, right? So it's important that's why I go back to like, get out of the content and keep it simple. Just do the straight, simple process of share and reflect. And then see what settles. Go slow and see what settles out of that instead of some sort of like process where you share and then I share and then you share and then it just like builds, like you just start building layers of like, I'm angry about
Resentment.
this, but you're angry about this, and and then if you do that, and then nothing's complete, and then you're just like nothing's fixed, or it feels like anything's been done, and then your resentment sneaks in. That over time is resentment, and that's a killer. That's a killer because if you're just in survival mode in a relationship, if you're there just sticking on because you're trying to survive. That's death. That's and if it's already dead, you might as well go ahead and kill it. That's where death doulaing comes in.
Yeah, and so so going down that path, I'm curious. So something that you mentioned was that you and your partnership have undergone profound transformations, such that you've initiated relationship death doulas 3 times. So can you share more about what that means? What was the context? And and how did you come back together?
The first time was actually initiated when we were in a level 2 ISTA. And so that's a whole thing. I'll just say, for those that aren't familiar with it, a lot of the theme of that experience is dying to yourself. It's a process of like ego death, ritual death of what you are so that something new can be reborn. And I feel like as humans, the deeper we can become into relationship with death, the more vibrant our life becomes. And that's a really wonderful, powerful practice, perhaps a whole nother podcast. But just this notion that death is a portal, and there are various kinds of deaths, and each death can lead to a state change, or the big ones, like initiations, can lead to a stage change. Like you initiate into another level of yourself or level of relationship. And so we're in the middle of this. We came as a couple to this ritual movement with ISTA, and in her infinite wisdom, she comes to me and says, "You know what? If we're really going to die, we need to die to our relationship as well. Because if we're going through this ritual and we're still in relationship to each other, that's going to be like an attachment that isn't going to allow this full experience to happen." And I'm like, fuck, you're right. Damn it, you're right. And so we said, okay, how do we do this? And so we created a ritual inside of that ritual that was happening, and we were in the same room. We separated. We had our altar together. We separated. We had ritually cut our ties. We did all this movement to really die to what we thought we had and be reborn to what's possible. And man, it was so powerful. It was so painful because we went 3 days in the space where we were kind of in a container together, but we weren't talking, and we were like trying the best we could to like hold it as like it's dead, and we really want it to be reborn, to just see what's next and see what's possible. And so we were in a pretty safe space, like together, and it was in a container, and it was magical because as soon as we just like our longing, the longing that was inside of us just grew so big through that process. And then when it was complete and over, we came back and said, all right, shall we start again? And we were like, fuck yes, we want to start again. We really, really want to start again. And so it was renewal. It's just like the seasons. It was like winter. It's like taking a relationship through this winter to shed all the dead stuff so that the new stuff could emerge, right? So we had that tool in our pocket, and we're like, wow, this is powerful. And so we just like set that in the toolbox, and then later, any relationship kind of falls into its ruts. You get into your patterns, and you get comfortable, and you get safe, and things kind of get bland, and right? And of course, in her wisdom, the goddess came to me and said, we need to kill our relationship again. And I was like, you're right. Yeah, I was so comfortable, but I don't want to do this, but you're right. And so that was more out of necessity. That was more out of like, mm, it needs work. It needs something new. And and because of that is even a little more scary. But we had the pattern already. We had the pattern of, and so in this one we did the whole ritualization, cutting ties. We even did a little like memorial to the relationship, and just like the obituary. We read the obituary and said, it was amazing. It was this. These were the issues. This is why it didn't work. Thank you so much, Great Spirit, for this opportunity to be in relationship with this human. And I let them go, you know, let it go. And it's powerful. I think it's also be great to have a third party, like kind of be present and holding that space for you. And we've actually thought, oh, what about becoming relationship death doulas? Is there a thing? Like, is that a thing?
Yeah.
But it really is this notion and getting close to death and saying, look, death is actually your friend, and it's a portal to the next iteration of life, and continuing to embrace that in relationship with yourself, in relationship with others.
I'm curious, Yana, about the fact that you guys are ethically non-monogamous. Can you speak to a little bit of your experience from that relationship format of how you guys navigate some of that stuff?
And
Yeah.
can I just add to that, like, and anytime there is a mismatched desire along with that.
It's challenging territory. I mean, monogamous relationship is difficult in and of itself. And you add other relationships, it really, it works for some and it doesn't work for all. And it's not some like everyone should be this way. I think monogamous relationships are amazing and really meant for many, many folks. And those that feel like exploring there's all the names you said, poly, open, ethically non-monogamous. There's different ways to frame it. It really is an opportunity to find your edges. You can develop a lot of knowledge on your own, but like that wisdom that lives in your body genuinely occurs in relationship to other, into the world, right? And so
Mm.
the ethically non-monogamous movement really is stepping into that and like feeling into what it is to be in relationship with someone who is also experiencing joy, love, ecstasy with another human. Um, I I'm pretty wired differently. I'm one of those that I actually am turned on when my partner is turned on with someone else. People call it compersion. Um, Compersion, for those that, if that's a new word, is if you can think of a spectrum of like jealousy is on one side, compersion would be on the other. And it's a lot like the spectrum of pain and pleasure. Like for some people, pain is really pleasurable, right? And for me, because when you're really jealous, like it's strong. That emotion is can like move people to war. Like that it has. Like it's really true. Like it's a really powerful emotional state. It's a mix of a bunch of different things. Um but if you think of it on a spectrum, like there's actually this place in that like it's all sensation, right? So if it's on this spectrum and on the other side is compersion, like the same amount of sensation and turn on can be present in the circumstances that would bring one to feel jealous. And so somehow it wasn't particularly a conscious movement for me. It was something I kind of sensed and sort of fantasized about, but found that when my partner is, whether I'm with them or in the vicinity or not, when I know that they're out visiting with someone else, um, I feel alive. Like there's energy moving through my body, and I'm filled with life, and so that's a turn on to me. And there's definitely places where it's been, oh shit, I am really like do I still belong? Does she still love me? Am I enough? Am I worthy? Like all those things definitely come along. And actually, just very recently, I had an experience of that, and um, it's just fascinating. As many times as I've experienced, being turned on, I'll still feel the experiences of jealousy, or like I had a freeze. Like I had this moment where friends, beloveds were over. It was sort of later at night. There was this little cuddle puddle thing happening, and I was like kind of tired. And I heard the cuddle puddle sort of elevate into more, erotic, sexual kind of stuff happening, and amazing sounds coming from the basement. And I was just like, oh, I should go down and just wish them well and say I need to go to bed and take care of myself. And I froze. I couldn't like penetrate into that space. I didn't want to interrupt them. And there was part of me that just I didn't feel sexy. I didn't feel like I was in a space to even say, hey, have fun. And so that was just a very subtle expression of my questioning myself and not sure about my own worthiness. And so I just chose this sort of like avoidance and just went straight to bed. And what happened was they were worried, you know, they were concerned for me. And the next morning, my partner came to me, Kali's like, is everything okay? Like, what happened? And did we do something wrong? Because then all of a sudden, when there's no connection, there's no communication, then there's this question, and this space opens up for like, oh, she was worried that she did or crossed the line or something happened. And more often than not, what you find out is it's a communication thing. Like 9 times out of 10, it's some mismatch in communication, and then we just develop our story about that was about. And so thankfully we have this place of being curious. And as I think about it, I think I was just a little bit afraid. I was a little bit scared to come and say anything, and I didn't feel resourced. And um
Hmm.
so luckily it was a little bump, but it's a great example of how things can really get off track. And I swear it is so often about communication. Like, were we clear? And I
Yeah.
think if there's ever an assumption to make in any relationship, assume that there's a communication breakdown versus malicious intent, or like some sort of they're not thinking about me, or they're not present about, or they're not giving me enough attention, or they don't acknowledge me for how amazing. Just let all that shit go to the side and assume first there was a communication breakdown, and get curious about where the breakdown was, because it really is more often than not
Yeah.
something in that domain.
Yeah, I hear that the communication is so huge, but I also just want to acknowledge that you just kind of gave Bravehearts permission to be like, wow, yeah, I'm not feeling it. I can't get there.
Mm.
Sorry, I have to go to bed. I can't go address it. I can't. And I think that's just really important, because there are going to be times when you're just like, nah, I don't feel sexy.
Yeah.
I'm not into this. It doesn't work for me. I don't know why.
Mm-hmm.
But I really love how you explained how you did it. You did avoid, but then in the morning, there was curiosity and then connection again.
Yeah. 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 We have a thing where we're like, we say, thank you for taking care of yourself. Honoring that we're not always going to be in peak form, and giving our partner space to be in whatever they're in, whatever that, funk could be, or whatever that place could be. Is like, I don't want them to bypass and push through and be fake and try to be something, when that really underneath, it's the truth thing is actually they need to step away. And if you can cultivate that in a relationship, then then all this sort of resentment buildup doesn't happen, because often we resent having to be a certain way because our partner expects it.
Mm.
Right?
Yana, what I just want the Bravehearts to hear, right? Like, you are probably, like, in my own perspective, like, one of the most experienced when it comes to communication because of your background. I mean, more than a decade of, like, being in these realms, and, like, very experienced in a very successful, in my opinion, like, open, loving relationship. And you still had a moment where you're like, I have all my tools and I still froze and I wasn't resourced. And so, and that the lesson is not that you had to be quote unquote perfect or be a certain way in that moment. It was that, again, in the repair process, right? You were like, oh, I can, like, you and Kali had the step of, like, let's be curious. And you were curious. And what I heard, curious and compassionate and graceful with yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah, I feel like being in a male body, we're often supposed to be the strong one, that no matter what, we're there and can hold the space and be the container holder. And there's often this sort of unconscious, I'm not supposed to feel, or I'm not supposed to be the one that breaks down. That's for my partner to be, and I'm there to just sort of be the solid character. And we're all human. We all have a heart. We all have this, like, tender. We all have these parts that have grown in these different ways. And finding a way to honor that for yourself and in the relationship is really a foundational movement to see if you can really give your partner space to be messy and still stay connected, and stay connected with yourself when you're messy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Yana, one last question is, as someone who has dedicated years to relationship study, and not only your own, but in support of others, what is one, like, dangerous truth about love, connection, and transformation that most people aren't ready to hear, but need to?
Ooh, you ready? You ready?
I don't know. I'm seated. I'm seated sitting down.
Love alone is not enough. We romanticize the idea that loving someone deeply enough, everything else is going to work itself out.
Mm.
But love, no matter how intense and passionate and sacred, is really kind of just the raw material, right? It's the alchemy of love in action, love in responsibility, love and discernment that creates sustainable relationship. Like the place where I really like this hit me so hard was with my previous partner and her children. She had they came when I came into the relationship. The twins were 8 years old, and the older sister was 10. And you know, there was deep mental health, special needs stuff with the twins. And I was like, I'm a commitment to love. Like, love conquers all, and I can be the one that's going to help be the glue. And 3 years later, I was just like dying. And she's calling me out because I'm like halfway. I'm already like 1 foot out the door, and so I like recommit and like double down on my love. And this is great. Like this is great because like how do you love in the face of someone spitting at you in your face or like wishing you're beheaded and dismembered? Like how do you love in the face of that? You're dealing with mental health scenarios like, and so it was like this quickening for me, but what it really taught me was that was sort of a naive place to be coming from. Love can't replace self-awareness. Love can't replace just some fundamental, compatibilities. You can adore someone and still be fundamentally misaligned. And love can't replace growth. If two people aren't willing to evolve, not just together, but as individuals, love can become a cage instead of a force for expansion. Yeah, the truth that people often don't want to face is love can be real and profound and still not be enough to keep two people together.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really how we love, right? Who we choose to love and whether the love is helping us become more of who we truly are.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I've teared up twice on this episode. I just want everyone to know. Yana, just like your wisdom, your ability to communicate and to share, like from such a deeply open-hearted place, is
so fucking big. Like I think this is so useful, so helpful for Bravehearts.
I'm so grateful you guys asked me on. I'm so glad to share. I'm just a normal guy. I've traveled this path, and been really on this path. Like, this is my passion. Like, everybody has their passion, like engineering or whatever it is, right? This just happens to be in alignment with my path. And so I'm glad to share some things.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so
much. And luckily, at Bravehearts, you can still get more of Yana if you want in a beautiful way, is that he is publishing his first book. And so Yana, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about it and what it's about.
Oh, yay. I'm so excited. It's like on the precipice of publishing. I don't know when we're going to air, but it might be about the same time. So the book is called Simple Magic for Health and Prosperity. And it's a practical guide to a magical life. And so what I've done in this book is, thanks to the miracle of modern technology, I've been able to synthesize rituals and spells and invocations and prayers from indigenous and mystical cultures from all over the world, and have brought it together in one book.
Beautiful. And I know your second book, which is already underway, is Simple Magic of Love and Relationships.
Yes. Yeah, I'm so excited. I'm already working on it. Like, to take rituals for the sake of health and prosperity or love and relationship and just synthesize them and make them really easy and accessible has just been like my life's passion. in the last few months. And so like this next book is really, really chomping at the bit to get that one out too. So yeah, I'm very excited to share that with you all.
Okay. Whew. All right, Bravehearts, you're going to want this one on repeat because so much juicy stuff. Yana, thank you.
You're so welcome. Thanks for having me. Thanks for sharing your space.
Thank you, Bravehearts. We'll see you next time. Love you.
Hey, Bravehearts, looking for permission? Work with us. We offer Braveheart coaching.
Follow us on Instagram.
Meet us in real life at a Braveheart conversation.
Subscribe to our newsletter.
Do all this and more at our website, permissiontobehuman.live.